You had a schoolboy hat too?
Yeah, man, I always rocking one. In the wintertime, because you can't wear the fedora, depends on what it is. Yeah, man.
So what's with the look today? How come you have this look today?
You know what that meant? But I tell, so I actually had to go for an appointment. But
Right.
sometimes, I wear a uniform to work every day. So whenever I can put on some nicer clothes, and I do like clothes, so I dress. I put on, not dress up, because people say it's dress. When people see me, they're like, "Oh, you're dressed up," but I'm like, "No, bro, this is halfway." Right? You know that, bro.
Cool. So what's that jacket? Where'd you get that jacket? That's a cool jacket, man.
Yeah, man, this is like a winter jacket. Honestly,
From where?
this is from Zara.
That is a Zara. That's a nice dress jacket. I
Yeah,
like the
you can, dress it
corduroy.
up or, you can dress it up or dress it down because it's actually corduroy. That's why I like
That's
it.
what
Right?
I mean, and that's a nice wide wheel corduroy too.
Yeah, man.
And then look
Got
at
it
the
from
watch.
Zara.
Look at
The watch. Listen, this watch is important, eh? This is from Dada. This is the last thing he ever gave me.
Dada's watch.
That's the last thing he ever gave me. Because he was a person that had a thing about time and clocks and watches. So I remember a few times for Christmas we'd buy him a watch or whatever, and we'd always make sure like it was something for him specifically. For some
Right.
reason, he just had a thing in their house. They must have had about 12 different clocks. So we always get him something around time.
And
then-
were they? Because I know Laverne was a big. When you met her, that was a big
Oh
thing
my
about
Lord.
time.
Well,
So were
yeah,
they?
for the-
Could you see it in them too? They were big time people.
Very. So actually, that's a good point. That's probably where the seed was planted because yeah, man, Laverne can't be late for anything,
No.
right? So yeah, but then I was there one day and for whatever reason he just wanted me to have it. He went upstairs and brought it down and just he gave it to me, right? And
Do you know what kind of watch it is? Like,
it is it's a Swiss military, right? Honestly, bro, I don't even know how much. I mean, I don't think it's not an inexpensive watch because whenever
look at it. Look, you can tell.
yeah. So yeah, but he wanted me to have it, and every now and then he would do these things, and I think he just realized the significance of it, right? There's certain things that he would like give to Laverne or even this. I think this is, as I said, he gave me the watch, and he just wanted me to have it.
Talk to Lord, make some of the family hear that.
Sorry?
Don't talk to Lord, make some of the family hear that because they'll be like, oh, see,
even, bro.
y'all been working him from long time. Am I
Whatever.
giving it stuff from me?
Because you know that, my brother, they can think whatever they want because at the end of the day, I know that we had our relationship
Yeah.
and that we had a connection and because as I said, people, we would go there and sit and talk and well, you know that the few times when we sat with them,
yeah.
I tell people all the time, like, man, when's the next time that you can have an opportunity to sit down with a person that has that kind of life experience?
Yeah.
Like, how many times do you ever get that opportunity? So I loved it, man. He would tell you these stories about when he traveled to Africa, being on the boats, months to get across the ocean.
Yeah.
All those type of things. When we talk about that generation, would leave and travel to another place and land with nothing.
Right.
And have to start from nothing.
Yeah.
And he did it more than once.
Mm.
So, to me, that was always, and I think he appreciated that because as I tell people all the time, when I look at those type of things, I always have to question myself. I said, would I have the nerve to do that?
Even today.
Even today.
Even with all that we have, that we could fall back
Would
on.
we?
You know
Would
what
I
mean?
always? And I said one time we're sitting down talking to him, and I was talking to him, and he always says these things, and I said, Dada, because I think it came up as to why, like you always want to sit and be talking, and he's like, why? And I said, because honestly, some of the things that you've done, I don't know if I would have the nerve to do that. I just don't know if I would. Leave your family behind, leave everything, and go to another place, land with absolutely nothing. You don't know anybody, don't even know the language half the time, and start again. And not once, not twice, maybe as far as I can remember, at least 3 different times.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would have the courage to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that we just had that connection where I really just appreciated that. Even, we've had conversations talking about with my father, your father. I don't know if I'm made of that kind of stuff, man. Seriously, I'm not even lying. I don't know if I'm made of that kind of stuff. Like, I would like to think I am,
Yeah.
but I aspire to it. Let's put it this way. I aspire to that.
Yeah.
But honestly, have I ever had my foot put to the fire like that where I know for sure I'm made of that stuff? Nah. So,
Like, and you wonder if, in a way, it's about that generational skip or that generational evolution where they were in circumstances where they made those decisions, so the generation of them weren't forced to have to, but they
Yeah.
still planted a seed that means that, because where's your eldest daughter now?
True thing. But we know, but, brother, that's
Where's
it.
your eldest daughter
But
now?
you see, as we get older, you know, we go through these phases in our lives because bro, you know, let's put it even between you and I. I'm hopefully the evolution from where I was when I was a little boy
Yeah,
to where I am now. I mean, you've seen that journey.
right.
So hopefully that is like, you know, it's been a good journey because I tell you something, man. You know, there was a time, and I tell people all the time, people are like, oh, Devon, you're this type of way. And I said, listen, you have no idea. There was a time in my life when I was so full of myself, it's not even funny. You know that. I mean, I'm putting on camera. Like, I was so arrogant, you couldn't talk to me. You remember that?
So if you think he's arrogant now, damn, this is
Listen,
nothing.
this is me
like-
subdued. People have no idea. I put it this way. Like, when I tell people sometimes, like, when I say to people, you caught me on a good day, I'm actually dead serious. Because, I mean, if you push me, I know that, no, brethren, you don't get to do it. I give it, because the other day, one of my good friends reached out to me in a way that I was like, bruh, you obviously don't remember who I am. Because, like, what do you think you're doing? You know what I mean? We literally had to have that conversation. So, what I say to people, but really I'm saying that because the evolution that I've come to right now, even with my children, you're talking about with Sarah and
Yeah.
even Sydney, man, I don't know if the word, I can't say proud or whatever. I know it makes me feel good because, like, those are my children, but it makes me feel good in a type of way. It's like, wow, man, look at what these girls are doing. Like, look at that. And with no fear. You know what I mean? Or even if they have any kind of trepidation, they're still willing to take that leap. As we always talk about, to see what am I capable of doing. And it's like, I am really, really happy that I'm here to witness that. Because the changes, I'll say, is like when they were growing up and all the different stuff that we talked to them about and we try to instill certain things in, because you would hope that it would come a time that they'd have some skill set so they can deal with things in life. And now when I see it manifesting itself, I wouldn't say that it makes me feel good. I feel good about it. And so you said the other day, like, my mindset has changed where I'm a little bit more at ease because I realized, like, you know something? I think they're gonna be all right after a while. You know, Sarah's out there doing. She calls every day and touches in with us, and I can see on her the joy and the happiness where she's out there doing this thing. I can see it on her. You know, Sydney, she's doing the volleyball and in school in a whole other country, where I can see for her, she's doing it, man. It's like, whoa, you know, I love it, right? So we started off talking about this, the watch and everything like this, but so sometimes every now and then I'll wear it just because it just reminds me, you know, like, yeah, man, as we talk about all the time, so we talk about standing on shoulders of giants, you know, because, yeah, man, you know, the stuff that, the things that he did in his life, so that my children could have the life that they do now, right? The things that my father, your father, my mother did so that we could have the life that we do now. Oh, man.
Well,
Like,
and
you
don't
know?
slouch Devon on the fact that I'm just thinking as you're talking, but we too are part of that journey. And we too, because I never forget a time when I was always like, oh, you know, I had a rough childhood, I had a rough childhood. And when you guys, I don't know if you were there, maybe you weren't there, maybe Dean and Jackie came over down to my place downtown there one time. And I don't know what had happened, and we were talking, maybe it's just that your dad had passed, and we were just talking about just looking back at the past. And then Jackie and Dean just talked to me in a way that I don't think I'd ever appreciated what it was like for you guys to being left at Burien. Like that you had that separate. It was the first time. It was funny. I was sitting there, I was going, and all the time I'm like, but I was the one who was away, and I was in the country, and you all were with mom, and then you all kept to Canada. And then Dean and Jackie started telling me this stuff about what it was like to then suddenly mom, you know, was gone. Because of course, you know, your dad left first, so we were all with mom, and you know, mom's always okay, it's cool, dad, go where you want to go, but mommy, where are you? And then I think for you guys, it was like the first time that suddenly, oh, we're not with one of our parents. And especially the core parent, right, who's always there and consistent. And then we're in this place, and yeah, we know these people, but it's a strange place. And then, because I guess I came and saw you guys after you kind of settled in a little bit, and okay, you know, so we know the rhythm, whatever. And you know, mom's in touch, or we get stuff or whatever. So you'd kind of, as everybody does, eventually adjust to just the norm of reality of where you are.
Yeah.
But I think that was but when they talked about just the impact, and then of course maybe remember all the times when I come see you guys and all the emotional stuff we go through every time we had to separate and stuff like that. And it was the first time I remember saying, I think, holy shit, you guys went through a whole experience too. You know, like you had it. So I guess I'm saying that Yeah, they probably like Dada, and then I think your dad, because your dad too making that decision was important, and he twice left Jamaica, right, and made that decision,
Yeah.
and really just with a hope and a prayer, just jumping out on possibility, right, which is what has been the journey of, if you think about transatlantic travels of African peoples, so
Yeah.
from slavery to then being a colonizing place where damn you gotta like rely on migration to get not just that there's not opportunity in your own country, but because it's so held by the colonizer that we're forced to leave that place to if we want equitable chance, right?
Yeah.
And then and they're doing it because they're hoping it will gonna benefit us, so we don't have to go through stuff. But then I guess I'm realizing that, but we went through a little bit of it too, because we were born already, and then
Yeah.
having to wait till they come, and then and then also just to have to transition here and adjust to here initially. Like that's part of so there's stuff that I know even with your girls too. You always try to make them to realize it because they were like, oh, sometimes we take stuff for granted. You're like, oh, girl, hold on. That's where your dad used to live. That's where your mom used to live. This is
Yeah,
where we're
yeah.
coming
Yeah,
from.
yeah, you were in the car the one time too.
Yeah.
You were in the car the one time when we had one of those moments. I think it was with. I don't think it was Sydney. It was. I think it
With
was
Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I'm like, oh no, be careful now, because yeah, the journey passed through this place that you're turning your nose up to. So be careful. Yeah, I know.
So really, I guess it's just to realize that your daughter's also standing on our shoulders.
Yeah.
And every generation stands on the generation before shoulder. And, I think what I'm also hearing you say is you're starting to see them grow into an appreciation of that a little
Yeah.
bit. Because before, I think where you struggled with them was when they were just sort of taken for granted and, I'm just like, we
we
just
went
have what
through
we
that
have
phase,
and
yeah. We went
the
through that
entitlement. And
phase.
now I guess you're seeing them go, okay, now you're getting it. And I'm glad. I'm seeing it
Yeah.
come together.
That's the phase. You're right, my brother, because we did go through that phase. I do remember that too, right? But yeah, so I think that's a good way of putting it to encapsulate it, because the interactions that we have now, that I see that they understand, right? And I think that it was always the concern that do they actually understand and appreciate what you're doing for them? And I think that it's getting to the place where I can see that they do. I see that they do. And so it puts you at ease. And for me, reflecting back is that, and I always talk about this too, is that even with my mother and my father, I hope that I was able to do the same for them, so that they got to a place that they understood. But I think sometimes in some of the conversation that we've had, that you can see that they, that we all go through that transition, I guess, So it's all good, man.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
but
but for me, back we talk about, but every now and then they always laugh at me because my oh, you're dressing up. I'm like, yeah, no, I have to. Every now and then I have to. I just, because I do. We're terrible, right? And I know that this is like a family trait where we love clothes. We do love clothes. I don't care. We love clothes, but every now and then I do. And when I go to work, they're like, oh man, this is how you come to work. I'm like, bro, this is how I walk the streets.
no NBA players have anything over you. It's like
This is how I
I'm
walk- this is
stepping
how-
into work. They could actually do a little red carpet for every time I
This
step
is-
into
this
work.
is how I walk the streets, man. I'm sorry, brother.
What about the rings? What about the rings?
Oh, the
come
rings.
from?
Actually, these are this is my wedding band. So it's actually Scott K. That's a Scott K band. This is actually this gentleman. He's passed away now.
Oh, okay.
But that's it there, because I do like jewelry, right? This is the weirdest thing, my brother. It's a piece of copper.
Right.
But all that is a copper pipe that I cut down and I sanded it down. So it's just a copper pipe
That's
that
you
I.
make your own jewelry as well.
Yeah. For this one I did. I liked it because I just wanted it was a piece of copper. I like the look of it because you mix and match it, because sometimes I mix stuff up because not always just silver. I do like silver, but I like to mix it up too, right?
Right.
I guess, which is also a family thing, because my wife always laughs at me, like, you and your sister wear so much jewelry. I said, I guess we do. Right?
Yeah.
And this, actually, I cannot remember where this one came from, but I just like the look of it. This one, this is the bracelet that Alexandra gave me. Right, so this one I never take it off. They always laugh because this is the only piece of jewelry that the wedding band and the ring, I never take that off. And this one, actually, this is a good story because Laverne, actually, this is my Christmas present from my wife and my daughters, man. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, so the same thing. A guy, Keith Jack, is a jeweler that makes it. So this is a one of, right? And I actually I was in a jewelry store. There's a jewelry store in Oshawa that I go into every now and then. They always laugh at me because, as she says, there's a lady in there, Emma. She says, you always see something that you like, and then you literally you build a relationship with it. You never just buy. We always know you're never gonna buy it the first time. You come in, you look at it. So I came in one day and she said, "There's a piece of jewelry in here. I know you'll like it." So we've actually already named it. It's Devon's ring. I was like laughing. So I go over and I'm like, "Oh my lord, I do like this ring." And she's like, "Yeah." And she says, "I know you're not gonna take it today. You're gonna look at it. You're gonna try it on. You're gonna come back. You'll be in the mall for something else. You come by again. You'll look at it again, and then then you'll decide, okay, and then you'll try it on one more time and blah blah." So long story short, because there's some stuff going on, with Sarah was getting ready to go to Australia, and Sydney was coming home and back and forth. So I couldn't I didn't feel comfortable pulling the trigger on purchasing a ring at that point. So I stayed. So she's like, "Okay, cool." Sure enough, I go in there one day, and the ring is gone.
Oh.
Right. So she's like, "Yeah, somebody came in and bought it. Sorry, blah blah blah." And so Christmas morning, I open up this box and it's the ring, and Laverne says, "Yeah." And I didn't realize because one week I was in the mall with Sydney, and we were in the store, and the lady was telling Sydney the story. So I think it was Sydney must have went back and told her mom. So her mom went and bought the ring, and that was the story that she went into the store and said, "Okay, there's a ring in here supposed to be for Devon." She's like, "Oh yeah, Devon's ring," right? Because they actually named it. So she went over and showed it to her, and she bought it for me. So yeah, because I do like jewelry as well. So she bought this for me, and
Really?
actually I love it, man. It's nice. So it's silver with it's got I think that's copper on the top. So it's the two different colors. So I like it because I can mix and match it. You can get away with mixing the different colors, right? Because you see everything in there is all mixed up, whatever. So I wear them all like that. But
Really?
yeah,
Wow.
but I like it.
that.
I know. That is something. I didn't realize that I did that too until Laverne pointed out to me. She's like, "Yeah, maybe that is a genetic thing, or some kind of twin bond, because Deanne wears a lot of jewelry and so do I.
And mom is a jewelry person.
And my mother is a jewelry woman. You're right. She wears a lot
Was
of
your
jewelry.
dad? Was your dad a jewelry? I can't remember if your dad.
Not so
Frank
much.
was a
He,
jewelry
he,
person.
he liked watches. He did like watches because I know he had a few nice watches. But as far as like rings and bracelets and stuff, no. But he did like his watches. I do know that.
It's funny. I'm not a jewelry person.
Yeah, I know you're not a jewelry person. But
I'm
every now and then you wear one or two pieces. But
do.
even though you're not a jewelry person, my brother, you do know that some of the pieces that you have are like incredible. Alright? You know that. There wasn't, and I gotta tell you, right, what's the watch that you wear that looks like, is it the watch you every time you wear it, I complimented you on it. Is it looks like a salamander or something? Which one is
Oh
it?
yeah.
You know that one, right?
What? Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It's like a dragon's head. It
That's
wraps
what
around like
it
a
is,
dragon.
man.
That's
So
right.
That's a really nice piece, and
Yeah.
I know I'm not the only one that talks to you about it every time you wear it, because
Yeah.
that's a nice piece. And I've seen you wear some jewelry that you don't have a lot of pieces, but I will give you this: when we're all cut out the same cloth.
Yeah,
brother.
the most I'm wearing now is because I love this one, this Jamaican flag
Right?
one that I saw somewhere, and it's cheap, like 20. It was
It
20
doesn't
bucks.
matter,
or
but
something.
you know what it is? I tell people, it's
color.
not what you pay for it. It's the significance of it, right?
Yeah.
Because you can tell when people are just wearing stuff because it's expensive, whatever, and you can tell when people are wearing something because it has some significance to them. And I think it's nicer when it has some significance to you. You carry it a different way.
That's
Right?
true.
Like I would just wear this stuff because I just like to wear it. But you can tell somebody. So if I was wearing it because I'm trying to show off, every time I'd be putting my hand and I'm doing this because I want everybody to see it. If you see it, cool. If you don't see it, it has significance to me. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
you're wearing it for you.
Yeah.
Wearing
Right.
it for
So
you.
that's
So,
the thing.
by the way, before I wrap this video up, so who's Dada? Just so people know, what's the relationship of
Oh,
Dada?
Dada.
to you?
Dada is Laverne. Laverne's my wife, and Dada is her grandfather, her maternal grandfather. Is it? Yeah, on her mother's side. So
yeah.
maternal grandfather. And the significance of Dada is I will tell the backstory on that because I guess Dada is her grandfather, but realistically and truly, that is the male that played the father role in her life.
Yeah.
And no disrespect to her dad, because there's a whole backstory behind that. But I'm gonna say that because of the way her life transpired, Dada ended up taking on that role as her paternal figure in her life. That was significant to her because when we did meet, I remember one of the significant things where I knew that we were traveling down a different path where this was more serious is that it was really important for her that I meet her grandfather. Right? So I even remember that we jumped on the subway like an hour and a half outside the Oshawa, walked an hour to get to their house, and yeah, we met and we actually really hit it off. We actually really hit it off. And even then, I knew the significance. Laverne was amazed because Granny is Granny, who's her grandmother, is a very particular lady. But because had walked out sweaty, she actually gave me one of her daughter's shirts to wear, which was a big deal then. So I knew that from the beginning that we really hit it off, and really significant person in my wife's life, in my life, in my children's life, because you know, as we say, yeah, man, just a really decent fellow, I would say. In my life experience, and I think I've talked about this too, Douglas, is that the way that he was with his wife and the amount of man, like he just really loved her and went out of his way to anything that he could do, the little things that he would do for her, that so she knew that she was that person in his life, you know. Man, I aspire to that the same way, because you know, like, again, it's on video, so I don't have to be afraid to say this, because I know my wife and I, we always say we're volume loud, so we come at each other in this type of way, right? But the one thing that I've said to you before, what I think I try to be better at as I get older, as we go down the path in our marriage together, that he did this thing for her where she knew that she was significant to him. And so for me, that's one of the things that I try. As much as we might have our different opinions or we come each other that way, it's always important for me that she knows that she is that significant person in my life. And I think I learned that from him. So that's why he's significant to me, and I know that he's significant to Laverne because he was her father, right? He walked her down the aisle, right? You know, same thing when we were getting married, and I know I wanted this woman to be my wife. He was the person that I you know, this is what I'm thinking about doing. I want to marry your granddaughter. Is it okay with you, right? That was something that was important because that was the person that he was in our life, you know.
Yeah, and you know what was really wonderful? I was actually found some pictures the other day. I was going through some stuff in my files here, and I take a lot of pictures and video, and I found these photos of Sydney and Sarah as little girls with their great grandparents.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about how significant that is because, of course, I was trying to think about, oh wow, I don't know my great grandparents. Like I know my grandmothers, because even my grandfathers, because my paternal grandfather, I saw once. I have a vague memory of as a very young child when he was sick in bed of cancer in the family home in Trelawney, Jamaica. And I remember I was scared of him because I just saw this old wizened man, and I remember he stretching his hand, "Come, my son." I never forget him saying, "Come, my son, come, my son." And I was screaming no, and I think my dad was behind me pushing me, and I think I ran to, it was Marilyn, my cousin, who I ran to, and then I remember him saying, "It's okay. It's okay. He's you know, it's okay." And then he died, I think maybe the day after or something like that, right? But then Mom's dad, as you know, right? I don't know if you ever met, but I never. Mom, I've seen the picture. Mom went to meet him late in her life. I think she met him late in her life. And then he died before I think we could ever go see him.
Yeah, I never met him.
But both my grandmothers on my maternal, and just like you, right? But then you knew your granddad on your father's side,
I knew my
who was also a significant man,
yeah, man.
right?
Harold was.
Yeah, in a really cool way.
Yeah, man. So all these people, but yeah. So actually, that's funny you said, because the one thing that I'm really happy about too with our family is that they actually, Sarah and Sydney, were old enough so they have a very good long memory of Dada, right? I know Sarah remembers my father, but Sydney, she was 4 years old when my father passed away, so she remembers him vaguely. She remembers the little things that he would do with her, because I know the big thing for him is, I guess one of the ways that we connect with them is that he would always play solitaire, and he would play the solitaire with them. So Sydney remembers him playing solitaire with her, but that's one of their major things that she remembers. Sarah remembers more of, you know, he'd always do this teaching. He was always teaching. So Sarah remembers those things. But I think with Dada, the things that some of the ways that generation goes about teaching, they remember that about him. So that's one thing that I think I'm happy that they were able to have that experience with him. Right?
Did they ever meet Grandma though? Mom's mom, the girls. I wanted to
They did, but very young.
They
so
were
the
young,
same
right?
type of way. They were too. I think they were too young to. You know, when you're that young and you see somebody tells you that's your great grandmother, and okay, but it doesn't really resonate.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's only later on maybe. you might, oh snap, I was actually got to meet my great grandmother, right? So same thing, not very many people do that. So that, I don't think they remember it that way. They, a few interactions, because remember they went to Florida the one time, so they got to meet her. But by then she was in a wheelchair all the time, so it wasn't the same gregarious, outgoing person
That
we
we experience.
as,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
different experience with them. But so yeah, so Granny and Dada, because they did live a long time, but they lived a long time in a healthy way, so they got to experience that, which was cool, right?
Yeah.
You know.
So funny, because I was thinking about how much more familiar I am. Because I was thinking about who did I meet, and they were from Claremont in Jamaica, and I remember saying, "Oh, that's where my mother's family comes from, right?"
Yeah.
And then I just started to think about place, and even in my head, mind's eye, that place, and then it made me just realize how I'm so soaked and steeped in my father's family that the physical place where my grandma, where I grew up myself. But when I think of Claremont, I just remember the one time mom took us down there, right? But even then, it's a vague memory now. I couldn't even find it if I
Because the
even.
funny thing about that, so my memories, it's funny
Yeah.
you said, because the memories that I have really, so I remember we lived in I guess is what Waterhouse, right? I do remember that.
Yes.
But I have a very short memory of that. And some of the memories that I have of that is being, so I remember walking to school, walking down the street, coming back home. I remember having to walk back around the sites around, I guess it would be the full block to get to my grandparents' house. So
Yes,
I remember my grandparents' house.
Yes.
But I don't so much remember my own home that I lived in. Because I guess we did spend a lot of time at our grandparents'
We did.
house. Right? But then after that, so then I remember when my parents left. But I remember Trelawney, because we're at Berrien.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was in Trelawney. I remember Trelawney. I remember Westmoreland, because that's where you lived.
No, I didn't live in
No,
Westmoreland.
no. Where did you live then? Tell
I
me
lived
again,
up. So I lived in northern Trelawney. Sorry, South Trelawney, because you were in the north. You were by the water. You're in Duncan.
But where's Duncan's Bay and all that stuff? But
Yeah.
where's your father's home?
My father's home is up in a place called Lorimer's, right?
So Lormer's is where I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
I should say Lormer's. But where's Lormer's?
In Trelawney still.
It is Trelawney
Yeah,
still?
still Trelawney.
Okay, so then Trelawney is my big
Trelawney's
Trelawney
is this place, yeah.
is the memory that I have
Yeah.
that is the most vivid, because I remember being in, like you said, being at Berrien. I remember walking up and down, because I remember we went back with Laverne to visit. We went to Ocherias, and we're driving down the street. I'm like, you know when you have that deja vu?
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
looked over to the right, and I remember the gully. And I was like, there's a gully around here. And I looked over there, I was like, oh my, as you would say, holy cadoodle, there's the gully. Right? And then I looked over back to the left, and I said, after the gully, there's a hill where Berrien used to be up on the hill. And I looked over, it's like,
There's the
oh
hill.
my Lord, there's the hill.
Yeah.
Right? But all these things, you remember, so that's why I knew that was the moment in my life with that resonated the most. Because what? We left when we were 7. So that time period we were in Kingston, Waterhouse, grandparents' house. Then my parents left, went to Trelawney, lived at Berrien. But then when we were at Berrien, those are the times when we would come to visit with you, or you would come to visit.
Yeah.
So I remember that. I remember walking out on the, like even at your father's house, being up at the top of that hill and being able to look out into the valley, all that type of stuff. Those things resonate in my mind for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I remember the first time when you were there, you were doing chores, and we went into the back where you kept the pigs, and I walked around, I was like, I didn't even know pigs were that big. I was like, what the rest? This big monstrous hog, not even a pig. Comes around the corner, you're looking at it, it's like, what is wrong with you? Like, you've never seen a pig before? I'm like, not like this, but right? But yeah, man. So those are all the things. But it's funny you talk about all all that journey and stuff going through, because I guess when you're going through it as a child, all these emotions that you have and you don't know how to process them, other than you know that they're there.
Right.
Because when you talk about all those things about the different things, I always remembered when we would come to visit, and we talked about it before. The thing that I always remember is whenever we would leave. Right? When we would always have to leave. So I remember you would always be at look like you were standing on the top of this hill, and you would watch us go away. Right? Or I remember one time we were driving away and you were running on the side of the road beside us, right? And I was like, oh my Lord, right? But now when you're, back in there, everybody's crying and there, but you don't know, like, you're crying because we're separating again, right? But those times you just go through the emotion. But now when you look back and think, oh, because you go through the thing and people say, but then that's why we're gonna talk about this because that's why it really offends me when people say, "Oh, your half brother, your step brother," because they don't understand. Like like there's such a bond there that it really offends me when people, "Oh, that's your half brother." I'm like, it's not my half brother, it's my brother, right? Which we talked about the other day again. When Dorothy was talking, and I said, like in my life, I know it's strange because I have brothers, but I always tell people like, "You are my brother." The rest of the people, okay, they're my brother because we have the same blood, but you're my brother because those are the times that we were connected. So it's not just bloodline, but that's another conversation.
Well, it's relational, right? I mean, no, what you're saying is a relation because as you're saying that, I'm just realizing now that I do appreciate people I know who do refer to their supposedly, where they share a sibling with one parent. But it's exactly what you just said, that usually when they refer to them as their half, it's because the relationship is like a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't see them very regularly.
Yeah.
They don't really kind of grow up with them.
Which is
But you know what I mean?
But you see
Whereas
how when you look back and you think to yourself, you have to give your parents their due.
Yeah.
Because even whatever struggles they were going through, the one thing that I think that all of them were aware of, your father, my our mothers, your Mutti, all these people, the one thing that they were aware of is that we were siblings, and I think that they tried to make sure that we had that connection.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever the struggles might have been, like I remember your father bringing you to come and see us.
But the thing remember the thing that shocked me?
Yeah.
Was when you guys were telling me that he would come without me, that he would drop off food and I remember saying, huh, what? Because all the time, I never knew that until I was an adult and you were here and you guys were telling me, oh yeah, you got this. And I said, well, he used to come. And I would say to you guys, oh, only came these times. And you're like, yeah, but he came all the time. I'm like, what do you mean he came all the time? I never came all the time. And you said, yeah, every time when he was passing by, he'd bring us food.
Because he was a farmer.
Yeah.
And he had food. And maybe he didn't, as you say, because they're doing all these things and we don't realize it, or different generation, they don't feel the need to explain it to us, they just do it. But because we were your brother and sister, he would bring us food.
Yeah.
Because that's not just those are his siblings. So he would bring food. And I knew he wasn't bringing food because it was my mother or whatever. He brought because he's providing still, I want to make sure that your siblings are okay.
Yeah.
Right? He did that.
Yeah.
And he didn't, he used to do that.
Yeah.
I remember walking down the street and he'd be like, yeah, come here boy and stuff like this. And it's like, yeah. Because it wasn't like he ignored us. He knew who we were. He was always really kind to us, which I don't think sometimes he gets enough credit for that. He was always really kind to us, never threatening. And your father was a big man.
With a big voice.
Right, but never. He was very, I think, we don't give enough credit to the fact that he was very aware of how he presented himself in the world. But he never presented himself to us that way.
It's funny, I was talking to Dorothy the other day about a number of different our perspectives on life, right? And hey Dorothy, if you're listening to this, you are this kind of person, very opinionated, passionate, as we talk about her. And I was talking to her the other day about this, and she was saying, I don't understand. And I said, okay, Dorothy, okay, so I guess the perspective that we have to struggle with is that, not everybody in the world had the same experience we did. So sometimes our perspective gets shaped about all this stuff in a particular way that sometimes make us a little bit impatient with other people's things. So when people say, oh, half, and we go, what do you mean half? Then you kind of go, wait a minute, but you probably go up in an environment where it was like that. That is how it was facilitated, right? Because even what you're saying about our fathers, I too, to your point around, even I would, with my dad, I was a bit, unkind to how I held him until just a few years ago when I went to therapy after I died to kind of work through some stuff and realize that I had to appreciate just what you're saying now as examples, partly because I learned about them a little later on, because the lens I always looked at was my own childhood experience with him where sometimes it was rough, right? But then when I get older and I appreciate, even in my elderly life, what it means to kind of manage your life and figure out all your relationships and juggle everything you're juggling, you don't get it all perfect, right? Some things slip. But the one thing I'm appreciating, even in my own life, is I'm stepping back and seeing my father did provide a certain framework, and my father lived in relationship to people in a way that if I look at it and notice it, I realize a lot of ways that I am in the world that I like about myself and that people give me feedback about myself is a lot actually how my father was around me, even if it wasn't always to me consistently. I observed it to other people. So even though the ways I am with my nieces and nephews, it was like, oh my God, you're like, even his wife in Jamaica, she'll talk about, oh, God, you're so make me think of your dad because as he would just never leave anybody out. He always remember, and that's exactly because even my cousins to this day will say to me, even when their dads or their moms weren't around and checking in, my dad was always present. So they always have a memory of my dad. So,
Well,
but
that's
I connect that back to also Devon. We have a particular experience, and this is what I was saying to Dorothy specifically to say that we did have an experience where whatever else was going on, and this is by no means me saying that they were perfect and didn't have things they should have worked on and they should have also checked in on, but some core things that they gave us was they did give us mostly a sense of security with them, so including your dad. And I was saying to somebody that they said, oh, but you had these step parents. I said, well, it's so funny when you say that because when I think of step parents, I think of those movies you see or those terrible shows about this horrible stepmothers, stepfathers. I was walking here yesterday morning, and I was, so I had to videotape the sky because it was this beautiful sky with this. And I remember thinking, in fact, I shared it on video, saying, I remember that I began to appreciate clouds because my stepmother brought me back a book from the U.S. that was about clouds, and how that stayed with me. That I always know when I look in the sky out, and I always remember back that the first time I began to notice clouds was because she gave me that book, and then it was an example of how she was constantly taking care of me, and I stayed with her, and she always treated me amazingly. Like I have no negative memory. And then I think of your dad, where even when I look at, there's no point where there was ever an expression that I wasn't his kid. So that when I say to people that I actually was fortunate because I had 4 parents. I had 2 mothers and I had 2 dads, and and I said, yeah, the dads were different in an interesting way, which in some ways helps me to evaluate my own life, but also other people that I engage with to recognize the diversity, right? Because my dad was I call him the infrastructural dad. He focused on that with me, and then your dad was the emotional dad who was about feelings and emotions, right, with me. And so I think we got that kind of. I guess maybe that's why we are so comfortable and confident in that in many ways, and why we can even touch into these conversations and check in with stuff because we did have that framework that, to be honest, Devon, not everybody got, man.
Yeah, but we know that now.
Not a lot
Because
of
by
people
that
get
time
that.
we're in an environment and you can tell when somebody, and we talked about it before, when we're all together, let's say as a family unit, and someone comes into that environment and you can tell they're uncomfortable with it. And then they get this thing where like, what are they talking about that? And do they actually talk about that? And why would anybody care how this person feels about that? But I said, but that's what we've always done. So it's nothing new. We've always had those conversations. And I always go back to that because I tell people to give mom her credit with that too. Remember mom would always say, if they ask, then that means they're ready for the answer because they're curious.
That's
If
good.
someone is curious enough to ask, that's because they want an answer.
Good.
So that was one thing that mom always did, and I tell people all the time because people say, well, blah, blah, blah. I said, if you asked her a question, she would answer, right? She would always give you the answer, right? About serious things. Obviously, there's stuff where it's like, oh, stop bothering me or whatever. But if there's stuff where she could tell that you were genuinely needed an answer, she would always give it to you, right? And even our father was the same way. If you asked him a question, he would do that, which is something that you learn all these things that I realize because even now my kids laugh and I tell them all the time. Every now and then we have a moment, and we do. If we have your arguments or your disagreements or your butt heads or whatever, they know that at some point or other we're gonna come back and we're gonna sit down and it's important for me that they understand that okay, so let's have a real conversation about without all the anger or the disappointment or the upset or whatever. Now we need to have a conversation about what was going on there, even all the different dynamics and so on and so on. Hopefully that. And I know same thing again as time has gone on. Sometimes they've initiated the conversation, so I know that that's something that they've incorporated into their life, which is I believe will be good going forward even with their family. So a lot of this stuff, So I know we have to correct ourselves on that because we always do that again. Remember, you always say, "Oh," because that's something that was taught to me, but then I have to say just thank you, and I did that for my kids, and you're welcome.
But that's good. I'm glad you said that too, because again, as I said, I want to paint a perfect rosy picture of, because yes, there was stuff and shit and stuff that they could have worked on more and done better at. Because I think the other thing too that's important is that I think in some ways they gave us some, even without them understanding, because I think that's one of the things I find with immigration experiences, right? And not just unique to our family, but to other people as well, is where, they bring you to these places and say, okay, go out into the world and learn some stuff because we know there's stuff out there for you to appreciate and learn that maybe they didn't get. But then you bring stuff in and they're like, what the hell hell's that? What's that you're coming in with now, right? So it's about always that, and I'm sure they won't admit it, but I always joke with mom about the time when remember we went to the supermarket and, her and my grandmother got into this tussle about food and what we should get and how we should treat people. And of course, my mom's annoyance was, well, when I was a kid, you wasn't doing that for me, but now you're doing it with these kids, right? So that thing where you watch dynamics where you go, okay, so of course it keeps evolving each generation. And they won't always acknowledge it, but they evolved it a little bit, and so we do as well. But I think in all of that, each of us learn at different generations new things that we add to our kids. So it's not like we got everything from them, but I think they gave us some little what I call plant seeds or breadcrumbs for us to kind our way. And I think that we extend it to the next generation. But as is happening with a lot of my work now in education and training, and I think that's probably started to happen with us as well, is that while our parents' generation was still of the nervous type for appreciating what we're bringing to them, except for your dad. I actually have to say, and then my dad a little bit too, and maybe it's because it's a gender thing where, as we know, women get put in the role of having to be gatekeepers of the culture. That doesn't even benefit them, but that's just because they are the parents who have to look out for everything, and they have to also worry about their own safety. People judge them in a way that men don't, so men can always have a little bit more looseness and flexibility to be whatever and whatever, right? So I want to give my mom that grace, as I want to give many mothers that grace, because I think the men get a little bit more flexibility to be much more, let me think and imagine and read and create while they're trying to make sure everything is held together. You know what I mean? In a way that we've evolved a little bit. So in all of that, though, I think where we've come to, which I think our dads began to go a little bit, is also recognizing how we can also learn from our children or the next generation, because that's something you and I've been talking about, right? And I'm seeing it in these workshops where some of these people say, holy shit, I don't get this race, I don't get, but my kids come and they say stuff and I'm like, how do you know that? And so I'm realizing my kids are teaching me.
Oh man. Well, that's the thing, brother. You try to get, because for me, you try to get to that space where they've evolved to the place where they see it from a whole different dynamic, where it's almost as if they're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So they have that concept and understanding of it in a way that we can't. Because I guess, oh man, it's just, but it's a whole different learning experience where you begin to have I guess, more of a understanding, and even as we talk about all these new tools in order to maneuver through, because it's, they see that their world is so different, man. It's like, whoa, and in a good way in a lot of things, like, because a lot of the stuff that they're dealing with, that's a lot of the residual and stuff that we have brought to their plate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even around race and all that kind of stuff, it's a lot of stuff that our generation is still bringing to their plate.
Yeah.
Right? And because that your niece had an experience the other day, and then we had to talk about that and all this type of stuff. Oh, you didn't know? We didn't talk about that? Oh yeah, man, she was there. She was somebody dropped the N-bomb on her, man.
On who?
On Sarah.
What?
Yeah, she's in Australia.
Are you comfortable talking about that?
Huh?
Are you comfortable talking about that on here?
Am I what?
Comfortable talking about that on here?
Yeah.
Yeah?
We talked
But
about
what
it already.
happened?
I already spoke to her about it.
But I don't know about it. What
I know
happened?
you didn't.
If you're
Okay, I guess
comfortable.
because, well, I was actually at work, so I didn't catch a hold of it, but we spoke about it afterwards. I guess she was at a function with her classmates and with David and everything, and they were at a club or some type of event. And I guess, I shouldn't say, well, I'm going to say I guess, because the way it was told to me is that there's a group of young people, really, really obnoxious, and I guess they got into the drink and everything, and so they were just walking past, and I guess it was, would they say an Aboriginal? Because one of the things that she said struck her is that this guy is darker than I am. But he turned to her and called her a nigger.
Wow.
Right? And of course, she said that it struck her. It actually made her cry, because she said, for as long as I've been in Canada, we've had these conversations, we talked about all these things, but nobody's ever just come up to me and just threw it in my face like that. So that's the first time she'd ever experienced that. So we talked about that a little bit too. And I guess with her group of stuff, and the good thing about it that David was there with her and some other people were there, so I'm going to say, as usual, it got into a confrontation. A bunch of the group, or in her group, which are North American kids, got into it with them and back and forth and so on and so on. But however it was resolved, so it didn't get physical, but it was just basically much like
Wow.
it's a whole different experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we were talking about that too, because her thing was she couldn't understand, he's darker than I am, so why would he use that epithet on me? At the end of the day, we always go back to when we were talking about that whole thing about it's a construct. Racism is something that was created, right? So in his construct, and the only way I could explain it to her, in his construct where he's from, he's an Aboriginal in a country where he's literally at the bottom of the food chain. But he does understand racism. So for him, he sees another target. And sometimes that happens. He was a young person. And I said, girl, my daughter, I can bet you bottom dollar when you look back on it, his frustration, his anger, whatever, and he's lashing out, and he sees you. But you're the easy target. Because that's the one thing we talk about. So when you say, if a bunch of white kids are there and he says, calls you a honky or whatever, has anybody ever responded to that? Who cares? Nobody cares. Because that's not a construct. But we know that some of the constructs, and I say constructs, some of the verbiage and some of the language and some of the weapons of choice, they were created to elicit a response. You are less than. This is a word that's created, and it's not even created as a word that is evolved, and we're going to use that as a weapon to make you feel less than. We're going to devalue you. We're going to do that. And the reason why they do that is because the only way I can enslave an entire race of people is to devalue them. You're no longer human. But that's all of that wrapped up as a young person. He's not able to do it, and he's still probably trying to figure that out, except he knows it makes him angry. Really, at the end of the day. I'm angry, I'm pissed off, I'm drunk, and here's this nigger.
Yeah.
But there's that one moment where in his construct, he's better than you. Right?
Or sometimes what we call lateral violence, where
Lateral
he recognizes that when I look around me here, who else is here? And if I'm in a position of competition or fight, I can weaponize, I can leverage certain language that's gonna mean that let me flatten this shit, right? If you
Right.
because y'all are North Americans coming here, da 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 da. It's kind of like when you think of us sometimes. Like I've been in a place to where I'm in the Caribbean, even in Jamaica sometimes, right? And if people perceive that there's some way that you're flexing your, foreignness in this place, they're gonna throw some shit at you just to kind of say, just to remind you, right? As you said, because it's messy, right? It's not clean,
messy.
but it's what's out there. And also, Devon, I think the other thing that is I think it's so interesting. I'm sure you talk about it with this too. Is that it's that thing about always a reminder to many of us that. That's why we're always connected to our people's experiences, because the other reality too, when somebody uses the N-word versus the N-word versus honky, right? Honky, people laugh and chuckle because that has no historic echo or resonance, and it has no current resonance or whatever, because white people generally have power everywhere, all over, even when they're poor white people and white people are intersections of identity that struggle. At the end of the day, generally, when you look around you, they ain't struggling or something. It doesn't reinforce nothing. Doesn't echo nothing, so it has nothing. But when you're talking about black people and you, as you say, you leverage that N-word, man, the historical resonance and echo and the current time,
balling up into a face and
just
smashing me in the face with
which
it.
is why then I call it what I call it the bullying effect, right? It's like also when people, especially when black people, and that's why I keep saying to people, watch that. What's that guy's name? That comedian's documentary there. Is it called The Closer?
Oh, yeah.
What name again?
Chappelle.
Chappelle, right? There's Chappelle. And that's why some people, you gotta watch it with that lens to understand that, that's what we call it, the bullying effect or the terrorizing effect, where you think, I'm just telling you, I'm just whatever. But you have to understand that when you're positioned in the culture, where at least through a certain lens or a certain intersection that you hold, that you do have power over people at a certain point of that other intersection. And that's what happens all the time. You see with men do it with women, right? Everybody does it with any other group, right? And so unfortunately, the internalized shit is that those of us who don't work with our own analysis, when we feel threatened, we also turn it against each other, right? Because it's like what we do with inter-islandism. That's what we do with colorism and shadism.
Everybody cares that the Jamaicans, because the Jamaicans think they're better than everybody else.
Yeah, and the Jamaicans, and to be honest, I know as a Jamaican at times I feel and I hear myself going there. Because we do. Or the other islands too feel like it's their thing to kind of say, y'all think you whatever, and you're thinking, I'm not even thinking that. That's not what this is about. But it's that moment of, as you said, all this blood, the construct that we're all caught in. That means at that moment, there's your daughter just trying to have a good night out. And because something comes up, people can always find that construct to use to just weaponize and hurl.
And I think for her, that's one of the first times because we have to talk about that too. Because at the end of the day, yeah, she's that light-skinned pretty girl. But at the end of the day, you're still a nigger. It does. But I know I used it on tape or whatever.
Yeah,
So that's
but
the
that's
first
the
time
N-word.
that's
Yeah.
actually happened to her where it's like, whoa, somebody actually came up to me and just like threw it in my face. I was like, yeah. So again, as we talk about all the time, yeah, you know what? That's one of the things we end up at some point or other, we're gonna have that conversation. So we have to revisit it because we have had those conversations, but come to find out that we've had the conversation based upon how it functions over here. Because
Right.
yeah, somebody does that to you on the street in Toronto, it's like, okay, so where's my recourse? Because here there's some recourse. If you do that to my workplace, I can do this, I can do that, I can do you know, even if my supervisor doesn't want to, literally we have it into the law where whether you want to or not, yo, we're gonna address this. But now you're in another part of the world where it's like, what is my recourse here? And that's a whole other thing, right? Because so actually one of our good friends who was born in Australia already actually had a conversation with Sarah about that, where Australia is not like North America, and also it's there's a lot of stuff that in our North American culture, where as much as we rail and carry on, where as time goes on, there's stuff written into law, but there's other parts of the world where that shit is not written into the law.
Right.
People will come up to you and talk to you any way they feel like, and unless you have, and she, I'll give her due, Kate Wheeler, I'll use her name because she's a really cool lady. Whereas like, there's other ways in which you're gonna have to learn to deal and maneuver. And so I guess for her, that happened. So we had a conversation. She talked to her mom about it and talk about different relationships. That I know that they always come and have those conversations with me, right? Because then it's like, okay, so we're gonna talk about how you felt about it, because all this thing about, well, no, and I was okay. I said, well, no, because you cried, and I know you're not a person that cries unless that struck you in a way. So let's talk about what it was that struck you and why did that make you cry. And so we had that conversation. But long story short, then so we talked about it and did some different things, and as we said, this is, again, we have to surmise and try and understand. But I said, as you said, my brother, historically there's different things that are in play. So as much as it was coming from a person that physically you would say looks more like you, then again, there's a lot of stuff in play there why he would choose you to attack. So
And to understand some of the dynamics there, where some of the white folks who don't say anything doesn't mean they ain't thinking that. Don't have behaviors that will still navigate. But the little, as you said, I love what you said earlier, when he looks around, he thought, well, what's the little power that I have is I can use a word. But he likely isn't going to be in a position to hire or fire or exclude you or to leave you out. And this is something that happens between inside groups, as we know, but also between different racialized groups. All kinds of this shit plays stuff up. But I never forgot though, a few years ago, remember when she had gone to Dominican Republic? And she told this story about the guy coming on to her. And when she came back, remember we were here having a gathering, we all unpacked that. I remember it was like this jokey kind of, and then I remember, but I think she told it in a way that we knew she still felt weird because she was there with her other friends, and somehow she's the one. And she said, yeah, on one hand it's because she is pretty, she is whatever. But I think she understood there was, and it wasn't when we all sat here, and I think Yvette was here too, and we had a whole big conversation about saying, but so why did this staff in this place feel he could come at you? Outside of the fact that, yes, you're a gorgeous woman, no question. But even so, you're with other girlfriends who also, they're not slouches either, but for some, and then to the way that you felt an attention that made you a bit of, it's a little, what's that about? And we know that that's also another weird way in which race plays itself, where you get seen as the one I could take some, as we say in Jamaica, liberties with, in a way that, oh, the white girls, I better be careful. You know what I mean? Even though you and them are still from the foreign, you're still whatever, but there's a way in which, and then in a funny way, it's a double edge, right? Because in another way, it's also, one could say, a way of welcoming you in, to say, I want to engage with you in a way that says you are one of us, so I'll do that play. So we're always on that, when you all this, right?
We're always in that dance, right? That dance is always happening. Because you know that when you go to different places, even like you said, you'll go to different places on vacation, but then they'll see you and they know that, oh, you're not from here,
right?
But you look like us.
Yeah.
And then there's almost this type of thing where the interaction sometimes is like, oh, it's really, oh, you know what? I'm gonna do a little bit extra for you. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do this because it's like, oh man, I
Yeah.
see you, I see you. You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And but then I always tell my kids like that's why I always say there's like so we're also more aware of them than the rest of people around
Aye.
because we feel that dynamic is like, oh, I see what's happening. Okay, you know what, man? Yeah, I appreciate that. Cool. Yeah, we're good. And you always have. I will say to my children like, you have to be. Funny how we always have these conversations. You have to be aware of that because if you interact with that person the same way that they do, and I'm just saying your other party,
Yeah.
it's more of an insult to them because
Yeah.
they're literally reaching out to you because they're as stupid as it sounds, it's almost like that little tiny little bit of hope. But then when you take that away, that's much more impactful,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So you have to be, So that's also probably one of the things that disturbed her too because like, well, I didn't treat this guy any type of way. Why would he come at me like that? Sometimes it doesn't matter how you treat them.
You're perceived.
It is what
So
it
it's
is.
like as my friend Dion Brown always says when we come back home. Oh, I was in the Caribbean, so and she's like she's always so terrible. I mean, listen, y'all know Dion's pretty cool, but it was more as her reminding us of exactly what you just said, Devon. Exactly that dynamic. She was all because we'd all go, I went to this. I remember when I was in Barbados at one time, and it just got a certain treatment, and she was like. Well, yeah, good for them because they're like, what the hell are you coming here with your foreign come act like you're a big tourist in this place and wanting all this entitlement, blah blah,
Yeah,
and of course, Dion was like, of course they're offended and that you now come, already we're in this goddamn tourism business where we gotta kowtow to all these goddamn white people, and then now you black folks come and want us to kowtow to you too. Get out of here! You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like get out of here. And this kid too with Sarah's probably like, well, you come here to act like you want. Let me just remind you, girl.
But
Let
then
me just remind you, girl.
But good
Like,
for her
you know.
because then I was saying she's like, oh no, I did that.
And it's true, you do. Because you do hear yourself sometimes. And my friend Davin's also the same. Davin's like, because if we start, because I remember I was at Devon in Treasure Beach and a bunch of us are going on about, oh, you come to Jamaica, man, and they want money out of you and them all the search out them hand and them want the shoes off for your foot. And Davin's like, I don't have time for y'all, you uppity niggas who come, you know the deal. Well, of course, what do you come here complain about that for? You know how you all sound like now, like you little colonizers coming back here with this attitude. And in that moment, because I used to, and then I said, holy shit, you're right. It's like, and he says,
they tell you
well, of
now,
course
brother,
they're gonna, people are poor, they're struggling, they hear stuff about North America, and then you come down here flashing everything. Why wouldn't they think, hey, can't you leave me there, whatever? So shut the fuck up. And then we were just like, for the rest of the trip, we're like, okay.
But it puts it in perspective all of a sudden, right? Because you forget, right? It's like, oh no. And that's where it is, the same thing. You always have to remember where you are along that, I guess, the food chain or whatever, because as much as we have moved to this point in our life, and then, there's always, depends on where you are, you have to be aware, man. It's like, well.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing too, because I guess, of course, I'm sure Sarah probably also did feel the nuance of when it's still an edgy kind of, no, right now it doesn't feel like you're pulling me in, or that you're reminding me about something I'm doing or not doing. And whatever you're feeling, the way it got delivered, even if that was the case, there's a delivery that was still in the context of where she was, that was hurtful, right? And I think, and that's why it's good that, I was going to say the important thing that I think is really great with you and the kids is that all through their lives, they feel they can come and talk to you guys about anything. Because I don't know that in our generation, we always thought we could talk to our parents about any and everything. So I think that's some of the gifts we're passing on, is to say, let's normalize these conversations because these are the nuances of life. And then because in a way, you're preparing her for, because she's going to be there for a while.
Her journey is totally different from ours, my brother. Because again, so there's all those nuances again, but the reality is too, you also have a white partner.
Yeah.
So then, and according to the way that they see, this is going to be the person that you're going to spend your life with.
Yeah.
So then you have your children or your offspring.
I was thinking
so
that.
So then you have to do that whole, and so it's important that we have all these conversations. And the one thing which I always tell people I'm appreciative of David is that
David's my niece's partner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Fiance.
Your fiance is that, we are different. He's curious and always interested, but he doesn't try to pretend that he's that I'm like one of you guys.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that I know that I value for it, that I give him credit for, and I value him for, is that he loves my daughter for who she is.
Right.
And so, when she has these things to deal with, it will be a learning experience for the both of them, I believe. But the one thing that I know is that he's willing to learn it with her, as opposed to, well, oh geez, that happened to you, and like, okay, then like I'm gonna try and understand how you feel. Right? Like I think that that David is that person that gives her that safe space. So I have to appreciate him and give him credit for that, right? So I appreciate that. So I'm not. But again, when we talk about all these different things, so again, we have to talk about that. There's all those different things where you have, and I'm glad that we have these open conversations and da da da. And we can have this same conversation with David, which I know, luckily for her, and I shouldn't say luckily. That's stupid. That's not the right word to use either, because I don't think it's a coincidence that David is the partner that she chose. Because when he's here too, he jumps in on the conversation and brings some stuff to the conversation. Sometimes, oh, okay, man, good perspective, right? Now, okay, cool, and we're able to incorporate it in, because I think for them when they have their children, that I look forward to that, because I want to see what that conversation is going to look like. I really do. I want to see what that conversation is going to look like.
Great.
You know what I mean?
It's gonna be great.
So,
In good old Australia.
Well, I honestly,
or wherever in the world, who knows? Could be anywhere in the world.
I put it on tape because I know that they go there, and even though she had a very negative experience, the experience that they're having so far,
Yeah.
is really amazing and dynamic, and they're doing some stuff that I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if
That's
they
their
decide to stay there for a while. I don't know if they will stay there forever, but I wouldn't be that surprised if they're there for a while. And the reality is, now I see it. Yeah. Our family is going to end up being all over the world. They're going to be. Sarah's in Australia. Sydney's in the United States. She's traveled all over they've traveled all over the place, all over places I've never been, and they think nothing of it. So, yeah, man, I wouldn't be surprised. Right? Like one day if I'm like in my 80s or something, and my grandkid lives in
Bali.
New Guinea. I don't even.
Hey,
I wouldn't even be.
I love it.
I wouldn't
I
be
love
that
it.
surprised.
That'd
I
be
wouldn't be
great.
surprised.
That'd be
what I mean?
great.
Because so it's all there, man. It's all good.
And the reality is that wherever they live, when we talk about racism, because even what you described happened to Sarah, just hadn't happened here yet, but it could have happened here as well. This shit happens to people all the
Well,
time,
we know that,
everywhere,
brother.
right?
Well, we know that.
So,
Because we have. So I said it's funny that as she said she didn't. And the only thing I would say to her is that, and I did say that to her, like, to be honest with your daughter, I'm actually surprised that hasn't happened to you before now.
Yeah.
But now that it has happened, okay, we'll have that conversation, because we've had conversations before, even things that have happened with me and stuff, and we talk about it. We talk about it with them and talk about it, right? So that they know that, I guess she still got broadsided by it because of how it happened, but I don't think it's something that it broke her stride for a minute.
yeah.
Okay, as opposed to what am I gonna do with this? So because it is, the reality is wherever you are, it is who you are.
And what I would encourage, you probably talked to her about this, but what I would encourage that from this experience, because of all the stuff it brings up in all those nuanced ways, is that to then make it part of, which I think she talked about. She actually talked about that already with me, about how she loves how even her studies with healthcare in her program, in her doctoral program, they've been talking about the implications of race and the indigenous community and stuff.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will also help her even dig a little deeper to say, let me understand a lot of, because it's likely I'm going to encounter this again, because it is and we know, because we've encountered that stuff all the time, it's just them now getting out into the world and going to hit all that stuff. And then how do I put into perspective each time to understand I live in this environment in this part of the world where this is a way that race, colonization, and all this shit plays out. That means that, and also, if she's going to be a doctor functioning, she's still going to be at a certain part of the social status ladder, that quite likely she's going to be moving in a different way. Even we know that as Black people in this part of the world, because one of the things that we always have to acknowledge too is that, and I say this to my friends all the time, we do realize that some of the issues we're talking about, we don't even live at the crux of it in the way that many racialized people live at it, right? And for her to be in Australia as a person of African descent in a way that in Aboriginal people there are going to still see her having privileges that still overwhelming they don't have, she's probably, and then her kids are going to be born into that environment, right? And her kids are going to be multiracial, right? And it's funny, I was watching something the other day about racial identity, multiracial identity, and anyway, I forget what it is now. It's probably another tape or another discussion. But it was really folks talking about, what it means then to be at that intersection. and having to really navigate the well, and the word, I know it's an overused word. It's the nuance of it all the time, right? All the time, you're gonna be around, black people are gonna look at you like, what the hell's going on there? And then you're gonna be white people who are like, whoa. It's funny. I sent you guys these two documentaries the other day. If you get a chance to watch them, and one of them, and they're both about these black biracial women. Well, both of them identify as black, but biracial women who, went through a journey where they initially their family told them they were white because they didn't want to acknowledge the mothers who had them didn't want to acknowledge the affairs that they'd had with black men to have them, and then the husbands who eventually got disclosed to agreed to keep the secret, but then they sort of pretended the kids were white, and then these girls grew up, and over time it was like clear that they weren't, and then they had to go through their own journey, and then both of them, interesting enough, one woman, she in her 50s, the German French woman in her 50s, but the other one, Lacey, she did it when she was, I think, in her 30s, coming out of law school. What they do to him now? They're gonna give him a vaccine exemption?
No. I was smelling something, but
No. It's what it is, Devon. You're sitting above the thing below you. I had the same experience. That scent thing underneath you.
What on earth is that?
That scent thing. I came yesterday to it. I was running around going, is some burning? Is the house whatever?
Right.
And then I came and I said, holy shit, it's that thing. It's so strong.
Yeah, but
And it goes in and
smells
out.
like something burning.
It
That's
does.
not a good scent.
It does. Oh, I know.
That freaks me out, man. I'm like, what is burning? Because that is not a good scent. Okay, well, all right. I guess Mom likes it. Let's put it back before she comes downstairs. Like, what is something there?
There is a good. All right, we could go on and on in this conversation, but but anyway, all I'm saying at the end there is just that all of this stuff is stuff we got to navigate, and she's having some experience. I'm sure she's going to have more of them to talk about, and hopefully, as you said, your girl, you raised them, and some of the same things you taught them and they saw modeled. She'll ride through this.
Towards it's funny that you say that because we talk about that too because so Sarah, yeah, right. The program that she selected and the fact that they even addressed that is pretty cool because we know that not every program is gonna do that. So I don't think it was a coincidence because the one thing about my kids that I found is they always do their homework, man. Good for them. Sydney, HBC school, like that was to me that was just like okay, she was very clear. No, that's what I want to have that experience. So good for her. So it's all good still. We're moving forward still. And just like you said, my brother the other day, I feel good about it. So I'm a little bit more relaxed as time goes on. Is that right? I'm a little more content.
Well, as we started with you rocking that great corduroy jacket from Zara, of all places. I never would have thought, Zara.
Well, then we'll wrap it up. We'll encapsulate it all with this. Yes, and my children love clothes too.
Sydney a little bit more.
Sydney, I don't know for sure if Sydney does a little bit more. I mean, Sydney have a different style, but it's hard to say. Sydney, they love clothes. Let's just put it that. We're a family that loves clothes. Their mom loves clothes. Our children love clothes. I like clothes. Their auntie loves clothes. Their mother loves clothes. Everybody loves clothes. They come from a family of people that love to rock the clothes. Yes.
And anybody who knows me watching this knows their uncle is, as one person said to me, and I'd admit it, I'm going to acknowledge it here on film, I am a clothes horse. There's no question. Somebody said to me, because this guy I was dating once, he said, because I was looking at his shoe game and I was like, whatever. And I said, you got to go to school. And he's like, what, to be a clothes horse like you? And I'm like, and it was like, first it was thrown as like almost like an attack. And then I said, you know what? You're right. I am a clothes horse.
I don't do that. I don't, before you feel defensive about it, but as time goes, it's like, yeah, no, I think. It's funny because now we talk about it, we wrap up again, because Sydney was talking about at school with her friends, are like, and she was having this conversation with me. She's like, I don't understand why. So they would rather go into a store and buy 6 items for like $10 each because they have 6 of them. I would rather go in there and buy the one for $60 because I know I'll have that for a long time. It's better made in there. I said, yeah, it's not just about, buying expensive things. It's about, I said, yes, you're right, darling. You come from a family that we prefer to have nice clothes as opposed to a quantity of clothes.
There you go. And that all started from the great grands and grands.
Oh, my word, right? And it all started.
Because we had a father, Frank, where Frank was like,
oh, my word, listen.
Frank was like, you see, when you watch a talk show, do you notice when the men sit down and they cross their legs, what happens? And I remember you and I were like, what is it? Like, this is him teaching us, right? What? Said, notice that they always have on a pair of boots. And you know why? So there's no break in the line between the pants leg and the boot.
I'm terrible, eh? Because whenever I go out now, and the other day I was doing this, I actually got a suit made because now I'm that guy too.
Yes.
And I'm very specific. And the guy saying, "How do you like you pick up?" Because I had tried on this jacket, but it had the bite in the shoulder.
Right.
I'm like, no, my right shoulder there's a bite there. You gotta take that. I was like, I didn't even notice that. I said, dude, I had a father that literally my pants have to be. I said my pants have to be an exact length because I want my break. It has to be ever so slight because if I'm really dressed, I wear boots. I don't wear shoes. I wear boots. And he's like, "Oh, boots." I'm like, I always wear boots. When I'm really dressed, I'll wear a pair of boots. And I said, yeah, it's just eventually evolved. And I said, yeah, I got that from my father. And I said, my brother does it. Whenever I see you and you're really dressed, if you're just out, you're dressed up there, you'll be wearing shoes. But whenever you really dress up, you always wear boots.
But I remember as kids, we used to even fight him. I remember when he told us that, I was like, what are you talking about? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then one day I remember I looked in my closet and went, holy shite, 90% of the things
everywhere.
I have are boots
Boots
because,
everywhere.
so it just sank in there. As much as I was like reeling up, I don't think it has to be like that.
I'm wearing boots today.
I'm wearing boots today. What do you think? It's like boots all, and I mean, yes, it's winter, but even in the summertime, when I'm dressed, it's always, I could never imagine myself dressing up and really dressing up and having a pair of shoes where it is. I mean, I know, even with the whole socks things, people like the nice socks and fancy socks, but at the end of the day, we know that we're really sharply dressed when you sit down and you cross your legs and there's no break between the pants and the shoes.
None at all. None at all.
So on that note, folks watching, we're leaving you with that.
There it is. And then started off talking about clothes, we finished talking about clothes. All right.
All right?
All right. Love you.
Love you too, brother.
Yeah, it's hysterical.
I guess you all want to see me too. Yeah, I saw me look today. I saw me tan today. Them can see me, yeah? All right.
I'm telling you. We always have these long conversations, right? Like, even when Sarah's in, is like, "Are you still talking to Douglas?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Oh my God, you guys talk?" I'm like, "Yes, dog. I mean, that's what we do. We talk." I'm gonna go check out mom, see what she's up to.
All right. And I'll get, yeah.
She probably didn't call me out.